I never disclosed to the police what I witnessed in the basement, because if I had, they would have questioned how I managed to escape. And truthfully, I still do not know. This occurred 2 winters ago, while I was employed as a night security guard at an apartment building outside Chicago. The building was old, inexpensive, and primarily occupied by elderly tenants who rarely caused any issues. My shift lasted from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. Most nights were uneventful. I would sit in the lobby monitoring security cameras, making coffee, and occasionally assisting tenants who had locked themselves out. However, around December, unusual incidents began occurring in the basement. At first, they were minor. Storage doors would open on their own. The motion-activated lights switched on without explanation, and tenants began reporting strange noises late at night. Footsteps, dragging sounds, someone whistling. The unsettling part was that the basement had been sealed off for years, except for limited maintenance access. No one was supposed to be down there. One night around 1:30 a.m., an elderly tenant named Mrs. Delaney came downstairs looking visibly frightened. "There's a man in the laundry room," she whispered. I immediately grabbed my flashlight. "What man?" "He was just standing there watching the machines." "Did you speak to him?" She shook her head firmly. "No, because he wasn't moving." That disturbed me more than I cared to admit. Even so, I assumed it was likely a homeless individual who had entered through the alley access near the boiler room. So I took the elevator down to the basement. The moment the doors opened, I detected a terrible odor. Not garbage, not sewage. Something damp and decayed. The hallway lights flickered faintly overhead. The basement extended beneath the entire building, filled with storage cages, exposed pipes, and abandoned maintenance rooms no longer in use. I called out, "Hello?" There was no response, but somewhere farther down the hallway, I heard the faint sound of metal clanging. I followed the noise past the laundry room. Everything appeared empty. Then I noticed one of the storage doors moving slowly, not opening, swinging, as though someone had just released it. I stepped closer. "Building security," I said. "You need to come out." No response. I pulled the door open quickly, an empty cage, only dust and an old wheelchair. But behind me, something scraped across the concrete floor. I spun around with the flashlight. Nothing was there. The basement suddenly felt enormous, oppressively quiet. I realized I could no longer hear the boilers running. Then my radio crackled. "Marcus?" It was my supervisor upstairs. "You okay down there?" "Yeah," I lied. "Probably nothing." That was when the motion lights farther down the hallway switched on, one after another, as though something was moving beneath them, slowly approaching. I froze. The lights stopped approximately 50 feet away. I aimed the flashlight down the hall, and for a moment, I thought I saw someone standing beside the pipes, tall, thin, completely motionless. Then the lights switched off again. Darkness consumed everything. I immediately backed away. "Nope," I muttered under my breath. I began walking back toward the elevator, now moving much faster. That rotten smell continued growing stronger. Then I heard whistling, soft, off-key, coming from somewhere behind me. I stopped walking. The whistling stopped as well. My stomach dropped. I turned slowly with the flashlight. Nothing. Only the endless hallway. Then, "Marcus," someone whispered, right beside me. I nearly screamed, but no one was there. I rushed to the elevator and repeatedly pressed the button. The doors finally opened, and standing inside was a man. At least I believe it was a man. Tall, extremely pale, wearing what appeared to be an old maintenance uniform. Water dripped slowly from his sleeves onto the elevator floor. He stared straight ahead without blinking. I stumbled backward immediately. "Jesus Christ." The man's head slowly turned toward me, and I realized something was terribly wrong with his face. His mouth hung open far too wide, as though his jaw had been dislocated. Then he smiled. I ran. I do not even remember consciously deciding to run. I simply turned and sprinted deeper into the basement while hearing wet footsteps behind me. My radio flew from my hand. I could hear that dreadful whistling again. Closer now, echoing through the pipes. I darted into an old boiler room and slammed the metal door shut behind me. The room was freezing. My breathing sounded deafening. Outside, the footsteps stopped, then came scratching, slowly dragging across the door, like fingernails. I held the flashlight with both hands, trying not to panic. Then my light landed on something in the corner of the room. A chair, old, rust-covered, facing the wall, and above it, words scratched into the concrete. He doesn't like people who leave. I remember whispering, "What the hell?" Then the scratching outside stopped. Complete silence. A few seconds later, someone knocked softly on the door. 3 slow knocks. Then a voice, my supervisor's voice. "Marcus, open up." Relief washed over me instantly. Thank God. I rushed toward the door, but before I grabbed the handle, the voice spoke again. "Marcus." This time it sounded wrong somehow, too slow, as though someone were imitating him. Then the whistling began again, right outside the door. I backed away immediately. "No?" The voice started laughing softly, not normal laughter, wet laughter, like someone drowning. Then the thing outside slammed itself against the door hard enough to shake the hinges. I screamed. The overhead lights burst instantly. Darkness swallowed the room. I heard the metal door bending. Another slam. Another. I dropped the flashlight and crawled blindly toward the back wall, and that was when my hand touched another door. Small, hidden behind old shelves. I yanked it open and squeezed through just as the boiler room door exploded inward behind me. I heard footsteps rushing inside, fast, far too fast. I slammed the hidden door shut and stumbled into a narrow concrete tunnel barely tall enough to stand in. Pitch black. The smell down there was unbearable. Rotting water, mold, something dead. I kept moving until I saw a faint light ahead. A ladder. I climbed so quickly I nearly tore my hands apart. When I pushed the hatch open, I found myself outside behind the apartment building in the alley. Snow was falling heavily. I collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for air. Police searched the basement that night. They found my flashlight, my radio, and the broken boiler room door, but they never found anyone else, nor did they discover any hidden tunnels. According to the building records, that section of the basement no longer existed. It had supposedly been sealed after a flood in 1987. 6 maintenance workers drowned down there. One of them was never recovered. I resigned the following morning. A month later, the apartment building burned down. An electrical fire, they claimed. But before it happened, one of the tenants left me a voicemail. I still have it saved. At first, there is only static, then faint whistling, and just before the message cuts off, you hear someone whisper, "Marcus, don't leave me down here."